My name is Adrian Sterling. It's a name that carries a certain weight in the culinary world, a name I inherited along with a restaurant empire built on my father's sweat and my own relentless ambition. He was the heart of the business, a man who knew every butcher and farmer by name, who believed a good meal could mend any sorrow. I, on the other hand, became the brain. After he passed, I took his single, beloved restaurant, the Hearthstone Grill, and forged it into the Hearthstone Group, a multi-million-dollar collection of upscale eateries stretching across the country. I traded his handshakes for spreadsheets, his aprons for tailored suits, his passion for profit margins. For 15 years, I told myself this was progress. This was legacy. But lately, a quiet disquiet had taken root in my soul. I lived in a glass tower overlooking the city, a place of silent, polished surfaces where the only sound was the hum of the climate control. I had everything a man could want, yet I felt a profound and echoing emptiness. The success felt hollow, the accolades like distractions from a truth I didn't want to face. My father had built a home. I had built a corporation. The decision came not in a boardroom, but in the sterile silence of my minimalist kitchen at 3 in the morning. I was looking at an old photograph of my father, his arm around a young chef, both of them beaming, covered in flour. He was happy. He was connected. I was neither. The whispers of discontent from my own company, the high turnover rates, the anonymous, lukewarm feedback in employee surveys that my COO always assured me were industry standard, suddenly felt less like data points and more like cries for help I had chosen to ignore. So, I made a choice that felt both insane and absolutely necessary. I was going to visit my flagship restaurant, the original Hearthstone Grill in Philadelphia, not as the CEO, but as a stranger. I needed to see it, to feel it, without the filter of deference and performance that always surrounded me. I needed to know if any of my father's spirit remained, or if I had scrubbed it away entirely in my quest for efficiency. 3 days later, I stood before a dusty wardrobe in the guest room, a space I rarely entered. I pushed past rows of identical dark suits and chose a pair of worn-in jeans, a simple flannel shirt, and a pair of scuffed work boots I hadn't touched in a decade. Looking at my reflection, I saw a stranger. The sharp, commanding lines of Adrian Sterling, CEO, had softened into someone less defined, someone who could be anyone. A flicker of fear mixed with a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I was about to walk into a room where I wasn't in control. I drove my father's old pickup truck, a vehicle I kept in storage for sentimental reasons, its engine rumbling with a comforting familiarity. The sleek, silent ride of my imported sedan was a world away. This truck had a history, a soul. As I navigated the familiar streets of Philadelphia, the city of my youth, I felt a nervous flutter in my chest. The neon sign of the Hearthstone Grill came into view, its warm, amber glow a beacon in the twilight. It was still beautiful. The dark brick, the large windows revealing the cozy, firelit interior, it was the image of success I had so carefully curated. A line of luxury cars was queued up for the valet, a sight that usually filled me with pride. Tonight, it made me feel like an outsider. The hostess, a young woman with a professionally bright smile and a name tag that read Chloe, greeted me. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Hearthstone Grill. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, for one." Under the name of Davis, I said, the alias feeling foreign on my tongue. Her fingers tapped efficiently at the screen. I noticed the faint, almost imperceptible tension in her jaw, the way her smile was a perfect, static mask. It was the polished veneer I demanded in my training manuals, but seeing it in person, it felt brittle. "Right this way, Mr. Davis." She led me through the bustling dining room. The familiar scent of wood smoke, rosemary, and searing steak filled the air. The low murmur of conversation, the clink of heavy silverware against ceramic plates, the warm glow of the central stone fireplace, it was all exactly as I had designed it. A wave of pride washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a new, unsettling awareness. I started to see things my CEOs I had always missed. I saw the servers moving with a relentless, hurried grace, their smiles fixed, but their eyes darting, constantly scanning, calculating their next move. I saw the busboys clearing tables with a speed that bordered on frantic, their movements economical to the point of being robotic. From a business perspective, it was a symphony of efficiency. From a human perspective, it was starting to feel like a forced march. Chloe seated me at a small table in a quiet corner, a perfect vantage point to observe the flow of the room, especially the entrance to the kitchen. Your server will be with you shortly. Can I get you anything to drink to start? Just water for now, thank you. As she walked away, I pulled out my phone, pretending to scroll through emails while I watched the room. The place was packed, a testament to its popularity. And yet, the atmosphere was tight, stretched thin. It wasn't the happy, chaotic energy of a thriving restaurant. It was the tense, high-strung energy of a system pushed to its absolute limit. A few moments later, a woman approached my table, and my observations sharpened into a single point of focus. She looked to be in her late 20s with kind, intelligent eyes the color of moss after a rain. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple, elegant twist, and though she wore the standard uniform, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that set her apart. A faint weariness shadowed her features, but it couldn't dim the genuine warmth that seemed to emanate from her. Her name tag read Isabella. "Good evening, Mr. Davis," she said, her voice soft but clear, with a gentle cadence that was immediately calming. "My name is Isabella, and I'll be your server tonight." "Thank you, Isabella," I replied, finding myself looking at her more closely than I had anyone in a very long time. There was a story in her eyes, a depth that the bright, professional smile couldn't conceal. "It's a pleasure to have you. Is this your first time at the Hearthstone?" I caught myself before I could say something like, "I designed the menu myself." "Yes, it is. I'm in town for a few days, and a friend insisted I try the Keystone ribeye." A small, genuine smile touched her lips, reaching her eyes for a fleeting moment. "Your friend has excellent taste. It's our signature. My grandfather used to say a good steak could solve most of life's problems." She paused, a flicker of something, nostalgia, perhaps sadness, crossing her face before she tucked it away. "It's dry-aged for 30 days and served with a simple rosemary butter baste that really lets the quality of the meat shine. Would you like to hear about our other specials?" "No, that sounds perfect. Medium rare, please." As she made a note on her pad, I saw her hands. They were capable and steady, but the knuckles were red and dry, the nails short and practical. The cuff of her sleeve was immaculately clean, but I could see where the fabric was beginning to fray from countless washes. These were the hands of someone who worked tirelessly. "And for a side, what do you recommend?" I asked, genuinely curious. For the first time, her professional demeanor softened into something more personal. "The truffled Parmesan potatoes are what everyone orders, and they are wonderful. But honestly, my favorite is the fire-roasted carrots with honey and thyme. They're simple, but they taste like, well, they taste like the earth. They pair beautifully with the richness of the ribeye." Her description was so simple, so heartfelt, it caught me off guard. "I'll have the carrots, then. And a glass of the house Cabernet." "An excellent choice. I'll bring your wine right over." As Isabella moved away, I watched her. She had a way of making each table feel like the only one in the room. She'd lean in to listen to an elderly couple, share a quiet laugh with a family, offer a sincere recommendation to another. She wasn't just performing a job, she was connecting with people, creating small moments of grace in the midst of the restaurant's frantic pace. But I also saw the other side. I saw her pause by the server's station, her back to the room, and press her fingertips to her temples for a brief second, her eyes closed. I saw the subtle way she shifted her weight off her left foot, as if trying to ease a persistent ache. These were the small, private moments of struggle that no corporate report could ever capture. The hour that followed was a revelation. I had always understood my business through the cold lens of data, food costs, labor percentages, table turnover rates, profit margins. Sitting here, disguised as Mr. Davis, I was seeing the human cost behind those numbers. The kitchen doors swung open and shut, a relentless metronome, offering glimpses of a world of steam, fire, and controlled chaos. Chefs moved with ferocious intensity, their faces grim with concentration. When Isabella returned with my wine, I decided to probe a little deeper. "It's certainly busy tonight." "It's always busy," she said, pouring the deep red liquid into my glass with a practiced hand. There was no complaint in her voice, just a simple statement of fact. "That's the sign of a successful place, I suppose," I mused. She met my gaze, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something complex in her eyes, irony, perhaps, or weariness. "I suppose it is. How long have you worked here?" I pressed gently. "Almost 4 years now," she said. "It's been an education." She paused, as if weighing her next words, then seemed to think better of it. The professional mask slid smoothly back into place. "Your steak should be out in about 15 minutes. Is there anything else I can get for you in the meantime?" I shook my head, but as she turned to leave, I couldn't stop myself. "Isabella?" She stopped and turned back. "You seem to take a great deal of pride in your work. It's admirable." The surprise on her face was genuine. A faint blush rose to her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "I believe any work worth doing is worth doing well. It's just, some days are more challenging than others." She offered a small, hesitant smile. "I should go check on your order." As she walked away, a pang of guilt, sharp and unfamiliar, twisted in my gut. When was the last time I had offered a sincere compliment to one of my employees? When had I last thought of them as individuals, taking pride in their work, facing challenges? My gaze drifted to the other staff. I saw a young man, a busboy who couldn't have been more than 20, practically jogging between tables, his face slick with sweat despite the cool air. I saw an older waiter moving with a stiff, careful gait that suggested chronic pain, his smile never faltering. And I felt it again, that undercurrent of tension, the unspoken pressure to be faster, to be perfect, to be invisible. It was the culture I had built. A culture of performance at any cost. My phone buzzed. A text from my COO, "Board meeting confirmed for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Have the Q3 growth projections ready." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Tomorrow, I would sit in a sterile conference room and discuss charts and graphs that reduce these human beings, Isabella, Chloe, the young busboy, to mere statistics. I would make decisions that would impact their lives, their ability to pay rent, their hopes for the future, all based on metrics that were blind to their humanity. Isabella returned with my meal. The ribeye was a work of art, perfectly seared, resting beside the vibrant, glistening carrots. The aroma was intoxicating. But as she placed the heavy plate before me, I saw it, a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her hand. It wasn't nervousness. It was the fine shake of profound, bone-deep exhaustion. "Does everything look to your satisfaction?" she asked, her voice a practiced, cheerful melody. "It looks perfect," I said, and I meant it. But my appetite had vanished. All I could see was the human cost of this perfection, standing right in front of me. "Please, enjoy," she said, her smile warm but her eyes tired. "Let me know if you need anything at all." As she began to walk away, I watched her stop at the server's station again. She leaned heavily against the counter, her shoulders slumping for just a second. She closed her eyes and took a long, slow breath. It was a moment of unguarded vulnerability, a crack in the flawless facade. In that instant, she wasn't a server, she was a young woman carrying a weight far heavier than a tray of food. Then, a nearby table flagged her down, and in a blink, the mask was back. She straightened, her smile reappeared, and she moved toward them with practiced grace. I took a bite of the steak. It was, without question, the best I had ever tasted. The flavors were complex, the texture sublime. It was the product of a system I had perfected. And I realized, with a dawning horror, that I had created a beautiful, efficient machine that was slowly, quietly grinding up the people who ran it. I was halfway through my meal when Isabella returned to refill my water. She moved with her usual quiet efficiency, but as she reached for my glass, her eyes darted around the room, a quick, furtive scan. Then she looked directly at me, a silent question in her gaze. In a movement so swift and discreet I almost questioned if it happened, she slid a small, folded piece of paper under the corner of my plate. Her expression didn't change. She filled my water glass, her hand steady now, a mask of calm professionalism. "There you are, Mr. Davis. Is there anything else I can bring you?" My heart was hammering against my ribs. "No, I'm fine. Thank you, Isabella." I waited until she was on the other side of the room before I allowed my hand to shake as I slid the note into my lap. Under the table, I carefully unfolded the small square of receipt paper. The handwriting was neat, precise, and urgent. "I know who you are, Mr. Sterling. I recognized your photo from an old article about your father. I've followed the story of this company for years because I used to believe in what it stood for. I'm writing this note because I have to believe that the man who is the son of Arthur Sterling doesn't know what's really happening here. Your reports won't tell you that Sophia, one of our cooks, works double shifts 6 days a week and still barely makes enough to pay for her mother's medication. They won't tell you that our manager pressures us to work when we're sick because calling out means losing a day's pay we can't afford to lose. We are exhausted, Mr. Sterling. We love the food we serve. We take pride in this place, but we are drowning. I believe you came here tonight for a reason. If you truly want to see the truth, please meet me in the back alley after my shift ends at 11 p.m. I'll tell you everything. Please don't ignore this. We are good people and we need help. Isabella." I read the note twice, then a third time. The words seemed to sear themselves into my mind. She knew. This whole time, every interaction, every professional smile, was performed with the knowledge of who I was. And yet, there was no anger in her note, no bitterness. There was just a desperate, courageous plea. She had taken an incredible risk. If I were the man my board thought I was, a single phone call could end her career. The fact that she was willing to take that chance spoke volumes about the desperation she and her colleagues were feeling. I looked up and saw her across the room, patiently explaining the dessert menu to a table. She was the picture of composure. But now I saw her differently. I saw a leader. I saw a woman of immense courage who had decided to become the voice for those who were too afraid or too tired to speak for themselves. The rest of my meal was a blur. I mechanically finished my food, paid the bill with cash, and left a tip that was far more than generous. But my mind was a storm of conflicting emotions, shame, anger, and a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. Walking out of the warm, inviting restaurant and into the cool night air, I looked back at the glowing sign. The Hearthstone Grill. A place meant to be a source of warmth and comfort. I had twisted my father's dream into a beautiful lie, a facade of perfection built on the silent struggles of people like Isabella. The drive back to my sterile apartment was agonizing. Every luxury, the supple leather of the truck seats, the soaring skyline, felt like an accusation. I had measured success in dollars, in square footage, in market share. I had celebrated record profits, while the people generating those profits were struggling to survive. Isabella's words echoed in my head. I have to believe that the man who is the son of Arthur Sterling doesn't know. She hadn't appealed to the CEO. She had appealed to the son. She had appealed to a part of me I thought I had buried long ago. Back in my penthouse, the silence was deafening. I paced the vast, empty rooms, the city lights twinkling below like a galaxy of indifferent stars. I was the king of this empty castle, and I had never felt more alone or more ashamed. At 10:40 p.m., I found myself back in the guest room, pulling on the same simple clothes. I wasn't putting on a disguise anymore. I was choosing to be the man Isabella hoped I was. The alley behind the Hearthstone Grill was another world. The glamour of the dining room was replaced by the stark reality of overflowing dumpsters and the metallic clang of the kitchen's exhaust fan. A single, bare bulb cast long, distorted shadows against the grimy brick walls. I arrived at 10:55 p.m., my breath misting in the chilly air, my heart a nervous strum. At precisely 11 p.m., the heavy steel door creaked open, and Isabella stepped out. She had changed into jeans and a simple, worn sweater. Without the uniform and the forced smile, she looked younger, more vulnerable, yet her posture was straight, her gaze direct. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice steady. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "The note," I started, my own voice sounding rough. "Isabella, I had no idea." She watched me for a long moment, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Didn't you? Or was it just easier not to look?" Her question was a blade, sharp and clean, cutting through my excuses. I leaned against the cold brick, the pretense falling away. "It was easier not to look," I admitted, the words tasting like ash. Tell me everything." And she did. Standing in that cold, forgotten alley, Isabella gave voice to the silent suffering within my restaurant. She spoke of Sophia, the cook who hadn't had a day off in 3 months. She told me about Leo, the young busboy I'd seen, who was a full-time student and often worked until 2 a.m., then had to be at an 8 a.m. class. She told me about her own dream of becoming a teacher, a dream she deferred 3 times because she was helping support her younger brother through college and couldn't afford to take the time off for her own certification program. "We're not asking for a handout, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice gaining strength, infused with a quiet passion. "We're asking for dignity. We're asking for a living wage, not just a minimum one. For health benefits that actually help when we're sick. For schedules that allow us to have a life outside of these walls. We are the heart of this place. We want to be proud of where we work, not just exhausted by it." I listened, each story a blow to my conscience. These were not abstract human resources. These were people with lives, hopes, and burdens I had never once considered. "Why do you stay?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "If it's this hard, why not leave?" A sad, knowing smile touched her lips. "And go where? To another restaurant with the same problems? The Hearthstone pays a little better than most, and honestly, we believe in the food. We believe in what this place could be. It feels like a betrayal to give up on it. It feels like a betrayal of your father's memory." That was the final blow. My own employee, a woman I'd never met before tonight, was fighting to protect my father's legacy from me. Tears I hadn't shed in years pricked at my eyes. "What would it take?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "What needs to change?" Isabella looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine hope in her eyes. "You really want to know?" "I need to know." What followed wasn't a complaint session. It was the most insightful business consultation I'd ever had. Isabella laid out a plan with startling clarity. A tiered wage system based on experience and performance, starting with a true living wage for everyone. A cap on overtime with paid sick leave. A small fund for educational assistance or emergency aid, funded by a tiny percentage of the profits. And finally, she spoke about respect. "We need to be seen as partners, not parts of a machine," she said. "We need managers who lead with compassion, not fear. We need to know that the man at the top remembers that his empire is built on the work of human hands." When she finished, a heavy silence settled between us. "If I do this," I said carefully, "if I make real, structural changes, will you help me? Will you be my compass? Be the honest voice I clearly need?" She studied my face, searching for a truth I desperately hoped she would find. Then, she extended her hand. "I will," she said. "But you have to promise me this isn't just for this one restaurant. This has to be for everyone. For Sophia, for Leo, for all of them." I took her hand. It was calloused and strong. "I promise," I said. "The work starts tomorrow." The next morning, I was in my office at dawn. Spread across my mahogany desk were not financial projections, but personnel files. I read them for hours, not as a CEO looking for liabilities, but as a man looking for people. Sofia Gonzalez, 3 children, 5-star employee reviews, working 60 hours a week. Leo Carter, college student, cited for lateness twice last month. I made a note to call his manager. I saw years of loyal service, of quiet dedication, of dreams deferred. At 9 a.m., my COO, a man named Garrett who worshipped efficiency, knocked on my door. "Sir, the board is ready for the Q3 review. Tell them I'm on my way and cancel the projector," I said, gathering a stack of personnel files. "We're having a different kind of meeting today." The boardroom was silent as I walked in and placed the files on the polished table instead of a laptop. "Good morning," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Before we discuss profits, I want to tell you about a woman named Isabella." I spent the next hour telling them everything. I told them about my night as Mr. Davis. I read from Isabella's note. I shared the stories from the personnel files, giving names and faces to the numbers on their spreadsheets. The reaction was predictable. Confusion turned to resistance. "Adrian, have you lost your mind?" one board member scoffed. "We're running a business, not a nonprofit." "Our current model is not a sustainable business," I countered, my voice ringing with a conviction I hadn't felt in years. "It's a slow-motion crisis. Our turnover rate costs us over $2 million a year in recruitment and training. The burnout is affecting service quality, which will eventually affect the brand. We are burning through our most valuable asset, our people. Investing in them isn't charity. It's the soundest financial decision we can make." I laid out a plan, the one Isabella and I had discussed in the alley, now bolstered with financial models I'd worked on all morning. I showed them how a living wage, better benefits, and humane scheduling could reduce turnover, increase productivity, and ultimately create a stronger, more resilient company. It was a battle. They accused me of being sentimental, of letting one emotional experience cloud my judgment. But for every argument about short-term profits, I had an answer about long-term value, about legacy, about building a company we could be proud of, not just one that made us rich. I was no longer just the brain of the operation. I was finally fighting with its heart. In the end, I got my pilot program. They agreed, reluctantly, to fund the changes at the Philadelphia location for 6 months. It was a test. It was my one shot. My first call after the meeting was to Isabella. I reached her on her day off. "Isabella, it's Adrian Sterling." There was a pause. "Is everything all right, Mr. Sterling?" "Everything is about to be," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "We have a lot of work to do." The board approved the pilot program. Phase 1 starts on Monday. I could hear the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a silence that was filled with unspoken emotion. "Thank you," she finally whispered, her voice thick. "No, Isabella," I said, looking out my window, not at the city, but at the reflection of a man I was finally starting to recognize. "Thank you." The road ahead would be long. There would be more battles with the board, skepticism from managers, and the difficult, humbling work of rebuilding trust. But for the first time in 15 years, the empire I was building didn't feel empty. It felt like a home again, its foundation no longer resting on numbers, but on the quiet dignity of human hands and the enduring strength of a promise made in a cold, dark alley. My father's legacy was not in the number of restaurants I owned, but in the kind of man I chose to be. And my work was just beginning.